When you shift from chasing to attracting, something extraordinary begins to happen in the dynamic between you and him. The law of energy in relationships is simple. What you chase runs, what you radiate attracts. Most people try to gain connection by doing more, sending another text, initiating another conversation, trying harder to be noticed. But the truth is, attraction doesn't respond to effort, it responds to energy. When you're operating from a space of lack, every word, every gesture carries that vibration of need. It tells him, even without words, that you're waiting on him to validate your worth. And that neediness, even when disguised as care, pushes him further away. The secret lies in reversing the polarity, from push to pull. Pushing means you're trying to force an outcome. Pulling means you're embodying one. When you are grounded in your own value, your very presence becomes magnetic. You stop over-explaining, overreaching, and over-giving. Instead, you communicate through subtlety, through calmness, confidence, and mystery. You don't need to convince him that you're the right one. You let him feel it. Men are drawn to the energy that feels both inviting and self-contained, the kind that says, "You can come closer, but I'm still complete without you." When you push, he senses pressure. When you pull, he feels curiosity. Pushing is loud and restless. It comes from impatience and fear. Pulling is quiet and powerful. It comes from self-trust. You stop trying to control how he perceives you, and you start focusing on how you feel about yourself. The moment you stop trying to make him do something, you reclaim your emotional authority. That's when he begins to notice you differently, not as someone seeking his attention, but as someone whose attention he feels privileged to have. Think about the times you've been around someone who radiated calm confidence. They didn't have to say much, didn't have to prove anything. Their silence carried weight because it was filled with certainty. That's the essence of the pull energy. It's not about playing games or pretending not to care. It's about embodying the belief that your worth doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's attention. You create an aura of stability, and that stability becomes irresistible. He begins to wonder what it is about you that feels so different, so unbothered, so sure. That's when he starts reaching out, not because he feels chased, but because he feels drawn. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice of inner alignment. It's learning to pause before reacting, to breathe before responding, to anchor yourself in your own calm center instead of spiraling into overthinking. When you do this consistently, you reprogram the dynamic. Instead of seeking connection from anxiety, you generate attraction from ease. And in that space of emotional independence, something remarkable occurs. He feels your absence as presence. He feels your silence as invitation. And the same energy that once pushed him away begins to pull him back in effortlessly. When a man begins to feel that emotional space between you, something stirs inside him. It's not the silence itself that pulls him back. It's what the silence represents. It signals self-respect, emotional stability, and the quiet power of a woman who isn't begging for attention. When you no longer rush to fill every pause with reassurance, he starts to feel the contrast. He's no longer met with constant validation, no longer certain of your thoughts. And that uncertainty begins to intrigue him. Curiosity is the birthplace of pursuit. When he doesn't know what's happening in your mind, he begins to imagine. And imagination, especially in relationships, is far more powerful than direct communication. The mistake many women make is believing that constant communication equals connection. But connection thrives in rhythm, in closeness and distance, in interaction and space. When you learn to let silence breathe, you allow desire to regenerate. If you're always available, he never has to wonder. He never has to miss you. But when you become comfortable in emotional space, he begins to feel a subtle tension, the kind that keeps him thinking about you long after the conversation has ended. That's when his thoughts begin to wander. What's she doing? Has she moved on? Why hasn't she reached out? And those thoughts are not born from manipulation. They emerge naturally when your energy shifts from pursuit to peace. Emotional space isn't about withdrawal. It's about balance. It's the recognition that your world is not revolving around him. You have your life, your purpose, your joy outside of this connection. And when that energy becomes real, not performative, he senses it. It's in the way you take your time replying, not to play a game, but because you're genuinely engaged in your own world. It's in the way your tone softens instead of tenses. It's in the way you respond with grace rather than urgency. These small emotional cues send a message that no words can express. You are no longer in emotional debt. You no longer need his presence to feel whole. And that realization pulls him closer because it shifts the power of the dynamic back to equilibrium. When you embrace emotional space, you also give him room to feel his own emotions. Sometimes men disconnect not because they've lost interest, but because they need time to process feelings they can't yet articulate. When you rush in to close the gap, you interrupt that process. But when you step back, when you give him the dignity of his own time, you become the calm in the storm rather than the storm itself. He begins to associate you with peace rather than pressure. And peace is what every man unconsciously seeks in a partner. This emotional distance creates a quiet magnetism. You're no longer chasing his attention, you're letting him feel the loss of it. You're no longer reacting to his pace, you're moving at your own. And that self-possession, that emotional composure, starts to echo in his mind even when you're not there. He begins to replay memories, to search for your energy in others, and to feel the absence of the warmth you once gave so freely. That's when his curiosity turns into action. That's when he reaches out. Not because you demanded it, but because your silence invited him back without a single word spoken. The moment you begin to understand that self-worth is not something to be earned from someone else, everything about your energy changes. Most people chase love because they are still trying to convince themselves that they are lovable. They seek validation not because they want attention, but because they are afraid of their own silence. When a woman starts operating from a place of internal certainty, when she knows she is valuable whether or not he responds, her entire presence transforms. She no longer reacts from insecurity, she responds from composure. That shift doesn't need words or explanations. It communicates itself through tone, through posture, through the way she carries herself. And when that happens, he begins to see her differently. Men are perceptive to energy, even when they can't put it into words. When your self-worth is intact, you no longer seek approval, you embody it. You stop waiting for his messages to feel confident. You stop reading meaning into every silence. You stop measuring your desirability through his effort. Instead, your focus turns inward. You begin nurturing yourself, reclaiming your emotional authority, and operating from the belief that your love is a gift, not a plea. That quiet confidence radiates without trying. It tells him, without you ever needing to say it, that you are not waiting, you are choosing. And men, by nature, are drawn toward the energy of choice. It feels mature, it feels stable, it feels rare. The mirror of self-worth reflects back everything you believe about yourself. If you believe you need to prove your value, he will see someone unsure. If you believe you are already valuable, he will sense it. This is why attraction always begins internally. It's an energetic mirror. The moment you stop performing for his affection, you start aligning with your truth. That alignment feels magnetic. He begins to feel a subtle tension when you're around, not because you're trying to get his attention, but because your energy no longer seeks it. He starts wondering what shifted, what changed, why you feel so different. And that question is the spark of renewed attraction. Self-worth is not loud. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't announce itself with attitude or defense. It moves quietly, confidently, like a current beneath the surface. You don't need to prove that you're strong. You simply stop engaging in what weakens you. You stop explaining your boundaries. You live them. You stop overgiving. You balance the exchange. You stop trying to predict his next move. You trust your own. And that emotional security becomes the most attractive quality you can project. He feels it even when you're not around. He senses that your happiness no longer depends on him. And paradoxically, that's when he wants to be part of it. Men often don't reach out when they feel that you need them to. They reach out when they feel that you are whole without them. Because in that wholeness, they see something they want to be close to. Your self-worth acts as a silent invitation, a reminder that connection with you is not an obligation, it's a privilege. And when a man feels that privilege slipping through his fingers, that's when he moves. Not because you asked him to, but because he feels the pull of your energy, calling him back toward what feels grounded, confident, and undeniably valuable. Most people think attraction is built by matching actions, by mirroring every move the other person makes. But true connection is created when you start matching energy instead. When a man withdraws, the natural reaction is to chase, to send a message just to feel a sense of control, to prove that the connection still exists. But that kind of reaction doesn't communicate love. It communicates fear. Matching energy is about emotional attunement, not imitation. It means when he's distant, you don't panic. When he's uncertain, you stay calm. When he pulls back, you don't run after him. You center yourself. You meet his energy with balance rather than reaction. And that difference changes the entire dynamic between you. When you learn to match energy instead of behavior, you begin operating from emotional intelligence rather than impulse. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "How do I want to feel?" Because how you feel determines the vibration you send out. When you operate from peace, you create peace. When you act from scarcity, you create more scarcity. So instead of trying to match his pace, you match your own frequency, confident, warm, self-assured. You stay in your lane emotionally, and that steadiness becomes magnetic. A man feels safe around a woman who doesn't crumble under uncertainty, who can hold her ground without hostility, who doesn't mirror chaos but mirrors composure. Matching energy also means you understand the difference between reciprocity and reaction. You don't give just to receive. You give because it feels aligned, and you withhold when it doesn't. That self-awareness creates a subtle boundary, one that communicates value without needing to explain it. You're not punishing him for his silence. You're simply choosing not to overextend yourself into places where effort isn't being met. And that quiet restraint speaks louder than any message could. It tells him, "I'm not here to chase connection. I'm here to co-create it." This kind of energy draws him in because it evokes respect, not pity. Every time you choose to match energy instead of behavior, you reinforce your emotional maturity. You're saying, "I will not be pulled into chaos. I will not let your inconsistency define my emotional state." That groundedness is what shifts the dynamic from imbalance to harmony. A man will always lean toward the woman who feels emotionally centered, who doesn't make him her emotional compass, but instead becomes a mirror for his higher self. When he feels that your energy remains steady regardless of his actions, it disarms him. It makes him question his own patterns. It makes him realize that your calmness is not detachment, it's confidence. When you stop reacting to his inconsistency, you stop feeding the cycle that keeps you anxious. You take back your emotional authority. You remind yourself that your peace is not up for negotiation. And from that place, your energy changes completely. You become more present, more magnetic, more effortlessly desirable. You don't have to prove your worth through effort. Your energy does it for you. You respond only when it feels genuine, not when it feels obligatory. You maintain grace where others might show frustration. That combination of calm and confidence shifts the balance, because when you're no longer chasing reassurance, he begins to seek it from you. When you no longer try to match his behavior, he starts trying to match your energy. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood concepts in relationships. People often confuse it with indifference, with apathy, with shutting down emotionally. But true detachment is something far deeper and far more powerful. It's the art of loving without losing yourself. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that you can care deeply for someone and still remain centered within your own sense of worth. Detachment doesn't say, "I don't care." It says, "I care, but I'm not controlled by this." It's the emotional state where you can desire someone, enjoy their presence, appreciate their attention, but you no longer hinge your happiness on whether they reciprocate it in the exact way you expect. That kind of freedom creates an aura of peace around you, an energy that speaks louder than words ever could. When you detach, you stop grasping for certainty. You stop trying to force outcomes. You stop needing to know where things are heading at every moment. Instead, you begin to trust the natural rhythm of connection. You understand that love cannot grow where fear dictates every move. Detachment allows you to stand in your power, to give without clinging, to communicate without pleading, to express yourself without the fear of rejection. And that energy, that calm detachment, is intoxicating to a man because it tells him you are in control of yourself. You are not at the mercy of his attention or absence. He senses that your emotions are not swayed by temporary silence or inconsistency. You have an inner equilibrium that cannot be easily disrupted, and that stability becomes magnetic. This form of detachment doesn't mean withdrawing affection or playing hard to get. It means you stop reacting from your insecurities. You stop texting to seek reassurance. Stop overanalyzing every pause. Stop trying to decode what every gesture means. Instead, you start responding from groundedness. You respond from strength, not fear. Your energy becomes consistent. Your presence becomes soothing. You stop clinging and you start allowing. You allow him to move toward you at his own pace, and because he no longer feels pressured, he naturally feels safer reaching out. When a man feels that he can breathe around you, he wants to come closer. And that sense of safety is what detachment creates. Detachment also means you begin to view yourself as the source, not the seeker. You understand that your love is an offering, not a transaction. You don't give to earn attention. You give because it aligns with who you are. You stop needing validation because you're already validated by your own peace. And from that space, something beautiful happens. You become unpredictable in the most alluring way. You no longer react the same way to the same patterns. You no longer play the emotional script he expects. Instead, your silence becomes filled with depth. Your calmness becomes a statement. Your absence becomes felt in the room. When you master detachment, you begin to glow differently. You carry yourself like someone who knows she can walk away without losing herself. You speak softly but with conviction. You no longer need to argue your value. It radiates naturally. You stop demanding closure from others because you've given it to yourself. And when a man feels that kind of independence, that balance between openness and self-assurance, he feels both challenged and captivated. Detachment makes you mysterious, not because you're hiding, but because you've stopped explaining. You've stopped needing to prove. You've stopped chasing certainty. You've simply learned to let go. And in that letting go, you become the very thing he can't stop thinking about. There is a subtle art to inviting someone back into your space without ever having to chase them. It's not done through words or grand gestures. It's done through energy. The way you carry yourself, the tone in your voice, the softness in your eyes, the ease in your presence. All of it communicates something far more powerful than any message could. When you operate from calm self-assurance, you become an open channel of invitation, not persuasion. You no longer ask, "How can I make him reach out?" Instead, your energy says, "You're welcome to," if you choose. That shift removes all pressure and replaces it with intrigue. Because a man doesn't respond to force, he responds to space, to freedom, to the quiet pull of feminine energy that feels confident and safe at the same time. The power of subtle invitations lies in emotional authenticity. When your actions, tone, and body language align with your inner confidence, people feel it instantly. You're no longer trying to prove that you've moved on, nor are you pretending not to care. You're simply comfortable within yourself. You can smile when you see him, not because you're performing, but because you genuinely hold no resentment. You can engage in light conversation without over-investing. You can be kind without being overly available. These micro signals create a sense of openness, an invitation for him to step forward if he chooses. And when that openness isn't laced with expectation, it feels safe for him to return. It's in the smallest details that the invitation lives. The way you take your time replying, not as a game, but as a reflection of balance. The way you maintain eye contact just long enough to spark curiosity. The way you end a conversation gracefully, leaving room for him to initiate the next one. You're not controlling the outcome. You're allowing space for his effort to grow. That sense of permission makes him feel like reaching out is his idea, not a response to pressure. Men are drawn to what feels emotionally effortless, and subtle invitations create exactly that, effortless magnetism. When you operate this way, your presence lingers. He starts to notice that he feels calmer around you. He feels more respected, more at ease. You're not demanding emotional labor from him. You're creating an environment where connection can naturally flourish. You've shifted from the energy of needing something from him to offering something beautiful to him. Your peace, your grace, your self-assurance. And that energy speaks louder than any pursuit ever could. It doesn't say, "Come back." It says, "I'm here, grounded, whole, and open." And that kind of presence draws people in effortlessly. Subtle invitations are about energetic alignment rather than strategy. When you embody your worth, when you carry an air of ease and confidence, you don't need to chase attention. It comes to you. The way you move, the calm in your tone, the composure in your reactions, all of these things whisper to him that you are a woman of depth and self-awareness. You are not trying to be chosen, you are simply available for what aligns with you. That silent permission creates the space where he feels both safe and challenged to step forward. He begins to feel that pull, not because you're calling him, but because your energy has become the very thing he misses. The calm he can't find elsewhere, the warmth that asks for nothing, the confidence that gives everything without fear of loss.